Hello guys and welcome to this new video. So we are here in the second game of the quarter final of the Fide World Chess Cup 2015 in Baku. So just talking about the results we have already before watching the game between Giri and Vachier Lagrave. So Elianov drawn in the second game today against Nakamura, which means Elianov is through the semi-final. He will meet either Mamedyarov or Koryakin, which are going to play the rapid game tomorrow. And in the first quarter, Zvidler and Wei Yi, the youngster, 16 years old, made two draws, and so they will have to meet tomorrow for the tiebreak. So we are going to watch the game today between Giri and Vachier Lagrave. I remind you that Giri and Vachier Lagrave drawn the first game, and now Giri is playing with the white pieces. So he goes pawn to d4, knight f6, c4, pawn to g6. And here he doesn't play knight c3 because he doesn't want to face the Grunfeld. But he goes knight to f3, bishop g7, and pawn to e3. Some friend of mine, a GM, won't say the name, but told me it was first played, I mean not first, but a couple of years ago, Grichuk made this line popular again, playing it in a couple of rapid games, and then other players started to play that. So I think it's true, I really believe the guy. So it seems like Grichuk is the one that made this move e3 popular again. So black castles, bishop e2, pawn to b6, castle, bishop b7, knight c3, and pawn d5. So this line has the reputation to be slightly better for white. So it's maybe not the best choice of opening for Vachier Lagrave, because Anish Giri is known to be a very strong player when he's playing for two results, either win, either draw. He's very solid, he's a very good technical player, and you don't want to face some dry position when he can use his technique. So out of the opening, well, it's still the opening, but I mean, the opening choice favors Anish Giri. He really played a good line, this e3 move. Avoiding the Grunfeld was really a strong decision. Here, he takes the pawn. There is another popular move, which is b4 here. This is the way the game could continue. Bishop takes and c5. So c5 is the important move in this pawn structure. We'll see it will be important in our game as well. So here the move b4 allows us to take, rook b1, bishop takes f3, and queen f3. So we had a game like that. I quite like, I think white is slightly better here, but maybe there could be some deviation and some improvement for black. So it's not like Giri missed the chance to get an advantage like that. So he went pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, bishop d2. So now black goes pawn to c5. So he's trying to cut, to open the center to have a stronger bishop. So this is logical. c5, we saw that already a lot of time, that in the lot of opening, when you start with d4, like the Slav or the Catalan we had just yesterday, we saw that this move c5 is really important. It's also the case today. So Vachier Lagrave goes immediately with it. Pawn takes c5, knight takes c3, so this is pretty much forcing bishop takes c3. So we want to exchange those guys. So when the bishop is off, of course, the dark squares becomes weak around the king. Bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and knight to d7. So here, Vachier Lagrave decides to sack the pawn. If he takes back the pawn, white could do queen a4, by example, queen c7, rook fd1, so stopping the knight from coming on d7, knight c6, and rook ab1. And white has a control of both open files, and he's applying some pressure, like a move like queen b5 is already a threat, threatening the bishop and the pawn. And so white has an advantage here. It's like plus equal, but it's a good long-term plus equal, as white really with the open files has a strong advantage. Nothing more, nothing less to say. So Vachier Lagrave doesn't want to play in this type of position because knight d7, so he's sacking a pawn, but he will try to have activity to attack those two isolated pawns on c3 and a2 and try to get one back. So white goes queen d4, a good move, like the queen is on its best square. Look at that, centralized queen is always looking beautiful. You look at so many squares at once, it's kind of crazy. So queen c7, rook fb1, so the a rook has to be committed to the a2 pawn, so we are going to attack the b6 pawn. And here black goes rook a5. I'm not fond of this move. He could have gone rook fc8, adding a pressure on c3, queen b4, threatening the pawn, pawn to e6, pawn to c4. This is an example. So the pawn now is protected by the bishop. Bishop f3, rook a5, and with the idea now to go rook to c5 to attack the pawn, the c4 pawn. So this was a possibility for black to play. So he's still a pawn down, trying to win back pawn. So white has an advantage, but it's not clear you win the game. Instead of that, Vachier Lagrave goes rook a5 immediately. Giri goes queen b4, straining the pawn. So the same idea as we saw in the previous line. Pawn to e6 and queen e7. So he's pinning the knight, and the queen is not, it's hard to attack because the rook on a5 has gone away from the 8th rank, so nobody can attack this queen, and this queen is just perfectly placed. Pinning the knight and looking at dark squares around the king, so it can become an attacking piece. Also, it can easily go back. So a good queen on e7 for the moment. And black goes queen d8, so to kick the queen away, but it will trade piece. He could have tried to go bishop f3, and rook c5 was another option. Unpinning the knight and threatening the pawn on c3. So still, white still a pawn up, so for the moment you can't say at all that black equalized, but it was another attempt to defend the position, another way to do that. Instead he goes queen d8, rook d8, and rook d1. The thing I don't really like in exchanging the queens is that it makes things easier for white to defend its pawn in this position. Now the knight is pinned, and it's not clear how you will bring pressure on those two guys. So black goes bishop c6, defending the knight. So he wants to free the rook. Knight to d4, attacking the bishop and centralizing the knight. Bishop a4. So now the bishop attacks and defends. Rook d b1. White change its target. Pawn to e5, kicking the knight away. Knight b3. So we'll go through the endgame, let's say, well, not very quickly, but quickly enough. So rook a7. So this is better. Like in those type of position, you don't want to go rook a8 because you want to double your rooks. You want to have a rook on the 7 and on the 8th rank. So rook a7 makes sense. So we can play back rook c7, rook c8, and now the knight is protected as well. Knight to d2. So we want to go to c4 or to play the move c4 and go on e4. Therefore, rook to c8, threatening the pawn. Pawn c4. So now this pawn is a good target, though it's protected by the knight, but it becomes a target. Maybe a move like rook b4, rook b1, and rook b2 could be an idea to switch the rook and attack the pawn. Bishop c6, rook b2, protecting the pawn from the second rank. You see the same idea with the rooks. King g7, pawn to f3. So we are making a pass for the king. Rook e8. Maybe we want to play e4 at some point. King f2, pawn to e4, knight to b3. So of course we don't want to trade this pawn. I mean, this is a bad pawn structure. Black is even not forced to take us back. He can just add a pressure. Those pawns are not looking good. You don't want to shatter your pawn structure like that. So we don't touch this pawn. We go knight b3. Pawn takes f3, bishop a4. Black is coming back on this square, looking at d1, might be useful. Also now when you play knight d4 back, you are not attacking the bishop. Rook to d1, rook to e5. So well, here Giri is doing something a lot of you knows, and I talked about that in my video where I am giving 10 tips to win and to improve your endgame skill. He goes rook d5. So the thing is that when you are in an advantageous rook endgame, you love to exchange pieces. So here white, not exchange pieces, but exchange a pair of rook. So here that's exactly what white is doing, and black cannot really go backward because it's giving too much space for white. Like if you try to go backward, maybe it goes rook d2 then, maybe then rook d6. Like he's seizing too much space if you always are going to refuse the exchanges. It's not the type of situation where you could do that because your rooks are not active. So black has to agree for the thread. And this is going to a pretty much forced line, in fact. Now bishop b3, pawn to b3 is forced. King to f6 is threatening king e5. So if you go a move like e4 to protect your pawn chain, which is usually good, but it would be good if you don't have the bishop. Now with the light square bishop, your bishop will be pointless. Black could go king e5, pawn g5, pawn f6, pawn h5, pawn h4, and I don't see how you will make any progress because you cannot get control of those dark squares. So white goes f4, a much better move, giving room for the bishop to play and stopping the kick from coming toward her pawn. Pawn to g5, also a logical move. He wants to shatter the pawn structure. Rook c2, pawn takes f4, pawn takes f4, king e7. So now he's preparing knight f6 and rook d7 in order to hit the pawn. Rook c6, knight f6. So now if rook takes b6, knight takes d5. And this is a fork. So white defends the pawn with bishop f3. Rook d7. Rook takes b6. Knight takes d5, so winning the pawn back. And rook takes d5. So we come to this really interesting endgame now. The grandmaster commentating the game referred to this endgame as being close to a draw. I mean, they've not been sure, but they thought it was close to be a draw. Someone wrote on the chat that Gustafsson thought it was absolutely drawn. I'm not sure because I don't speak German. It was just some guys writing in the chat. Myself, I didn't really have an opinion on that because it's a complicated one. But usually, if you have a 3 against 2 with pawns on two sides of the board, maybe it's theoretically drawn. I mean, if you play against Stockfish, the best computer in the world, maybe he will always proceed with a draw. But the thing is that it's not easy to do so. So the first idea for white, and I think you found that, is to bring the rook behind the pawn. So this is very important in the endgame, to bring it behind the pawn and then to push the pawn. It's not that easy to perform. So king g3, pawn h5, king h4, rook f5, so attacking the pawn. We'll come to the plan quickly. Rook to b4, preventing the pawn. Rook d5, rook c4, and king to f6. And now white is going to proceed with the plan. He will play pawn to b4, rook to c2, and rook to b2 in order to bring the rook behind. So he starts with pawn b4, king g6. So he brings the king to protect the pawn. Rook c6 check, pawn f6, and rook c2 now. The thing is that if black goes rook to d4, threatening the two pawn, white goes rook b2, rook takes f4, king g3, rook d4, pawn b6, rook d7, pawn b6, rook b7, and king f4. And the thing is that it's a bit like in a pawn in a king endgame. Let's say we have a king endgame, a pawn endgame. Sorry. So we have only the king and the pawns on the board. The only thing is that white will always have the possibility to get the opposition because he can play waiting moves with the rook. And black can't play waiting moves because as soon as you make a waiting move, which is rook b8, he goes b7. And you have nothing more available. So black will have to move the king backward, a way or another, and white will be able to come forward and to eat a second pawn from black and then push the other pawn. So this endgame, you seem to win a pawn with black with rook d4, but the thing is that as the b pawn is going further, your rook is committed to that and the king is dominating, the white king will be dominating the black king. Black doesn't want that to happen, and therefore he goes f6, rook c2, rook to b5. So he's stopping the pawn on b4, which is much better for him. White goes rook b2, king f5, king g3, king e4, rook b1, and here black is playing rook king d3. I think this is not the best way to defend. I've been watching a bit and I cannot find how white make progress. If I play king f5, king f3, king e6, king e4, king d6, so the king is going toward this pawn, so the white king anyway cannot come forward as the rook controls the fifth rank. King d4, king c6, king c4. So now black has to take a decision. If you go king b6, white is simply going rook e1 and he's freeing the rook, attacking your pawn, so you cannot do that. So you go rook f5, strengthening the pawn. Rook f1, rook f5, rook f1 defending, king b6, rook f2, king c6, king d4, rook d5. And I could not really find how white could make improvement. The only idea was for white was go rook c2, check king d6, and rook c4, getting the rook on the fourth rank. But the rook is passive here. As I said, you want your rook behind. So maybe you can try to make some maneuver with the king and try to win the game somehow. I didn't clearly see how white could make a big improvement there, but the comment zone is here. Maybe some of you have insight about that. Maybe you read something on a website and well, you understand how to win against this defense. Bring the king toward the b pawn and defend with the king and bring back the rook on the other side. So if you guys have questions, suggestions about this one, the comment section is for you. It's really interesting, and I hope that within a week we will have some deep analysis by maybe Carsten Müller, I guess his name, is doing some interesting article for ChessBase, or maybe Jacob Agard, which is having the quality chess edition. So he's also a good specialist and could analyze that. So waiting for that as well. So don't hesitate, comment. So he didn't go with his defense, goes with king d3. So he's going for the defense when you attack the rook and you try to eat the pawn. So Giri goes king f3, king c2, rook a1. So black now wins the pawn on b4. And white goes rook a5, so he's going to win another pawn himself. And the thing now is that the king is far away. So if you try to go, by example, king d3, bringing the king back, white just goes rook d5, rook d5, and then goes to hit your pawn. And this king is a perfect shield. So white is having the pawn and the passed pawn, and your king is not coming any closer. So rook a5, rook b3 check, king e4. So he's trying to get this king away and to make a path for resource king. Pawn to h4. So now he plays pawn to h4. So after rook h3, defending the pawn and attacking the pawn. So you defend and you attack. So it looks a perfect move. White can play rook a2, king d1. So bringing the king further, trying to get close, and king f5 now. And the thing is that the rook is defending the h-pawn, and this king is too far away from the game, and white is going with his king eating your pawn. So this is not something you can do. So black goes h4, king f5, king d3, king takes f6, king e4. So the king is coming back, but white now is a pawn up, and the pawn is really close to the end zone. f5, so pushing the pawn. h3, it's also usually a good move to bring the pawn closer. Rook h3, rook a4 check, king f3, So he's going for the counterplay, because if you play just simply king d5, it's going to be really hard to stop this pawn, as it's really pushing quickly. Here, by example, we could go maybe rook to h4. Let's say black goes rook f3, going close to the game, rook h5, and slowly but surely helping the pawn to be pushed. So I think this would probably be winning like that. So black goes king f3, is trying to go for counterplay. This is a good idea in the endgame usually. If you think you are lost by defending passively, always go for the attack. White goes king g5, rook b5, rook a2. So this is another important move. Now the king doesn't have to be cut from the fourth rank. It's better being cut from the second rank to make sure it's not going to grab pawns. And now we're threatening king g6, f6, king d7, and going forward. Rook b4, f6, rook g4, king f5. So now after rook g2, if black goes rook g2, white could simply go rook a3 check, king f2, and rook takes h3. So black cannot go to hit the pawn. He goes rook f4 check, king e6, rook e4, king d6, threatening f7, rook d4 check, king e7, rook e4, king f8. So the king is going behind. It's a bit like a Lucena. A rook alone cannot stop him. Rook b4, going for the check from the long sides, f7. So if you give a check here, it doesn't make point because white is just going away, and it's f8 on the next move, so it's not working. Black goes rook f4, so it's trying to make the check. So now you have to make the bridge. Rook b2, rook a4, and rook b6. And so on the next move, king e7 and rook e6 or f6 is coming. This is the Lucena bridge, and this is game over. Black can't do anything. If by example go king g2, trying to go on, king g7, rook a8, white is on time to play rook b2 check, sorry, and you have no time to hit the pawn. f8 is coming next, and if after king g2, king g7, you hit the pawn, is just queening with f8. And if you go rook a7, pinning the pawn, is just going rook b2 check first, king to somewhere, and king g8, and you don't have the checks anymore available. So black just resigned, and white is taking the full point, and Giri is getting to the semi-final. So a very impressive technical play by Anish Giri in this game, and he truly deserves to be in the semi-final. He's maybe the most impressive player so far. I mean, of course, Eliadov played impressively good for the World Tournament, but the thing is that Anish is a very stable player. He's among the top 10 players in the world. He was really competing well in the Sinkfield Cup, by example. So he's a very stable and strong player, and we really rarely see him lose. So he's good in rapid. He's losing rarely in the cup format. This is a strong statement. So let's see if in the next round Zvidler or Wei Yi could stop him. But he's really becoming the favorite of the tournament. So thanks for watching this video. See you tomorrow or after tomorrow for some more action. Bye guys.